Yes, folks, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and that somewhere is right here on Mojo 50 Radio. You're tuned into Critical Thinking with me, myself, and I, your host with the most numbers here on the network. Yes, it's Andrew Coppens, and it's time for Critical Thinking, your weekly dose of critically thinking through the news and views and all sorts of things in between. Do not forget, you can follow me on social media, whether that's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Parlay, at The Coppens Show. If you're new to the show and you're not watching via the Facebook page, well, you can spell my last name Coppens. And may I suggest heading over to the Mojo 50 Radio Facebook page so you can see this show in its entirety, live and direct, for your viewing pleasure. Now, if you cannot view this show and you want to see it later, head over to the YouTube page for myself. That's youtube.com/Andrew Coppens, youtube.com/Andrew Coppens. Very, very simple. I have to say thank you to each and every one of my new subscribers that are out there, and you guys continuing to spread the word. Please share the videos, share the show. We are about to be in one of the most existential fights of my lifetime. And I know every single radio host, every single TV host tells you that every election cycle. But right now, we are set up to watch socialism versus some form of republicanism on display in the 2020 election. And for me, I urge you all to subscribe, share, and join in the fight for facts, faith, freedom, and free markets to reign supreme over authoritarianism and socialism. Now, that doesn't mean that Donald Trump is the answer per se, but it does mean that Bernie Sanders certainly is not. And as we sit here today on Saturday, it is South Carolina up in the Democratic primaries, and I'm gonna guess that Joe Biden wins this. But I think it's going to be a narrow victory for him, and that means he goes on to Super Tuesday. What it means for the rest, well, I really don't know. I think Tulsi Gabbard is out, Tom Steyer gets out. I think a lot of people start clearing the path. We might see A.B. Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, and Bernie Sanders going on to Super Tuesday as the four mainstream candidates, and that sets up Bernie Sanders to just plow through this field. He may not get to the requisite delegates to outright win the Democratic nomination, but it's clear that his path is the greatest, or the one with the least resistance to it, because he looks like he's winning California. It looks like he's going to win Texas. It looks like he's going to win the biggest states out there on Super Tuesday. And when you do that, you get the plurality of the delegates. So, what is going to be coming up on this show? Well, the coronavirus is beginning to spread across the world. The stock market has tanked a bit, and I'm going to tell you what it all actually means. And of course, the children debated on Tuesday, and well, if you want my reaction, here you go.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Seriously, folks, what in the hell was that thing that they called the debate on Tuesday? We're going to talk all sorts of that sort of stuff. We're also going to talk the Libertarian Party having a candidate base that's nearly unified on this thing called open borders. Why? I'll discuss it, and we'll have hopefully a common sense discussion here on what's going on. But let us start with Bernie Sanders, who is starting to get exposed as the con man that I have been saying he is for years now. And I've called him out multiple times as a complete and total con man here on the program. But before we get there, it's time for This Week in Socialism Sucks.
But on this issue of the potential political peril you and Democrats could suffer in Florida, Congresswoman Donna Shalala said, come on down to Miami and meet with the people who have been affected by his regime. Would you be willing to do that and hear them out?
I go all over the country, of course. Cuba is a dictatorship. I've said that 8 million times. But that does not mean to say, as Obama pointed out, that even under a dictatorship, you could teach people to read and to write, that you could provide health care to all people.
I would like you to justify the fairness of your proposed policy to cancel student loan debt.
You bet.
Nobody forced these students to take out the loans, so should it not be their responsibility to pay them back? Why am I, a taxpayer who joined the military to pay for my college education, start paying for other people's college education? And to that extent, should you cancel my mortgage debt?
Oh, wow. So can you characterize what you heard in the meeting? Were there questions answered? And do you feel like you're getting the response that needs to come from this task?
Well, it's still ongoing. We are getting, it is still ongoing, so we are getting some increased responses from the CDC and relevant officials. I think what's really important is that folks stay as diligent as possible about symptoms and to call the CDC hotline if you have been in contact, if you have recently traveled. There is a lot of screening happening at airports, but as we know that we have our first locally acquired case in California. So we want to just make sure that everyone stays calm, but if for any reason you have pneumonia type symptoms with little to no cause, to make sure you contact the CDC or your physician.
Do you think that the briefing gave more information to the extent that this is going to go? Is it going to expand? Is it going to contract? Is it, I mean, were they alarmist?
Well, we have, the meeting was declassified, so much of the information that we have is in line with the public statements that have been released by the CDC. I think what's important is that folks, A, remain calm, but B, I know it sounds banal, but one of the key parts to preventing transmission is washing your hands and not touching your face. You know, there's a lot of folks that are trying to ask themselves, do I need a mask? Talk to me about the efficacy of the mask. A mask will not protect you if you don't wash your hands and if you continue to touch your face. So make sure that is the key number one thing that you need to do. 20 seconds, happy birthday twice, and make sure that you make sure that we stay diligent on those public health aspects. Our public health system is going to be the key critical aspect of preventing transmission.
Donald Trump does not have a tremendous record to stand on as it relates to criminal justice reform. He has one bill passed and a strategy that has not served Black and brown people for years from before his election, right? I think Donald Trump does not have a strong record to stand on as it relates to Black unemployment. He has Barack Obama's record to stand on with that. And I think that at some point, Black folks have got to look themselves in the mirror and say, hey, do I want to follow Mark Burns? Do I want to follow Katrina Pearson? Do I want to follow Diamond and Silk? Like, who the hell are these people, right? Instead, you want to give Donald Trump kudos for throwing Cheez-It bits at you and then criticize the people who have spent their careers doing things for the betterment of Black people and Black society. And I would just say at that point, if you still go over to Donald Trump after that, shame on you. Period.
So we'll address some of the things that we saw in this montage in a bit, but I'm going to go ahead and give you a minute here to settle in, and may I suggest perhaps getting you some of that APR coffee.
The best part of my day is starting it with a cup of American Pride Roasters coffee. This is the official coffee of Mojo 50 Radio. My favorite blend is white chocolate caramel. Silky caramel dripping on white chocolate bars. Caffeine gaspic. Can you just imagine the goodness? I don't imagine it because I have my own bag that I brew when life needs a reality check with APR coffee. Go to AmericanPrideRoastersCoffee.com and order your blend today. No matter how you drink it, with cream like me or black like this whole month of February, American Pride Roasters Coffee will make your day. Tell them that Watson from Battle for Freedom sent you. American Pride Roasters Coffee. Might I suggest the Watson White Blend? I mean, the white chocolate caramel blend. That's if you're into that kind of thing. Get your APR coffee today. American Pride Roasters.
Yes, folks, Watson did it again. He whined, he complained, he peed and moaned, all because it's his month, and he got himself a brand new coffee. So, folks, you can purchase this white caramel coffee through the end of today. That is February 29th. Yes, welcome into leap year. Welcome into leap day. You have until the end of today. Head over to mojo50.com/donate, mojo50.com/donate, and it only costs you $15. You help us at the network. You help continue to grow libertarian and conservative thoughts. And most importantly, you get yourself something in return. Again, that's mojo50.com/donate, and you can make Watson's fragile ego ever so happy by making that purchase through the end of today. You've got hours, folks, hours. Head over, while you're watching this show, head over to mojo50.com, hit that donate button, and you'll get yourself some coffee for just $15. And I'm judging by that commercial that we just had, it's going to be good. Now, let's get back into the show, and I can't not start with Bernie going really full communist sympathizer and pulling off the sheep's clothing of his real socialistic/communistic viewpoints. Folks, I am sick and tired of Bernie Sanders saying that he's a Democratic Socialist. It's like me saying that I'm a Jewish descendant because I believe in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. That would be ridiculous, and so is Bernie Sanders' claim to be a Democratic Socialist. So that's where I want to start. Let's go ahead and address this idea of Bernie Sanders and Democratic Socialism. So first off, he's not a Democratic Socialist because he cozies up to and has long advocated for and believes in communism. Even if he tries to tell us that's not what he thinks and that he calls out those authoritarian regimes all the time. The truth is, Bernie Sanders has not met a single revolutionary, that's right, a single revolutionary communist that he's not willing to praise outright in some way, shape, or form. But today, he claims that he disavows those authoritarian aspects of revolutionary communism because why? He wants the power of the presidency, and that power means the ability to complete the revolution from within, not via the bloody means in other revolutionary communist areas. Now, I'm not comparing Bernie Sanders to Nazi Germany, but I want you to think about how revolutionary socialists or revolutionary communists, how they became and got power throughout the 20th century. It was either through bloody revolutions like the things that happened in Cuba, Nicaragua, what happened in Russia, or you had just straight up, we're going to try the revolutionary side, not having it work, and then deciding that you're going to change from within, a la Nazi Germany. The Nazi Party largely started as revolutionary socialists. Then they decided after that revolution was not winning over the people to change from within. Bernie Sanders has long advocated for revolutionary policies and revolutionary thought here in America, as far back as the 70s, all the way through the 80s and the 90s, all the way through up until now. Now, suddenly, he disavows authoritarian regimes. He is not about democratic principles in any way, shape, or form. This man is about transforming us into a pure socialist society from within. He is a radical, revolutionary socialist, and socialists lead to communists down the road. Furthermore, he isn't a democratic socialist because he advocates for the government taking over parts of the economy from private enterprise. Bernie Sanders has advocated for the government takeover of things like healthcare, the energy departments, infrastructure, and then let's not forget about a jobs guarantee for everybody that can't find one in the so-called private sector, plus so much more. So let's start with healthcare because I think this is obvious. This idea of Medicare for all It will eliminate private insurance, whether Bernie Sanders believes it or not. His proposed bill sitting on the Senate floor today calls for the abolishment of private insurance. That means there's one game and one game in town. Now, maybe he thinks that farming that game out to these private companies to administer is the way to go, but it is still at the behest of the government. The government tells those individuals what they can and cannot offer, how they can administer this, what the costs are going to be. Every aspect of healthcare will be up to the federal government under Bernie Sanders. Now, I want to make this abundantly clear. It is true that some people under Bernie Sanders will get to keep their plans. Those some people, his union cronies. Now, if you know anything about union history, you will know that those unions are revolutionary socialist in nature. They have always been that way. Whether or not they seem fluffy to you, or that if you've worked in a union shop, they represent you, the reality is the leadership are a bunch of revolutionary socialists, some of which are actual communists. So in Nevada, he tells the Culinary Workers Union that they can keep their Cadillac plans. They can keep what they like. But the rest of us schlubs that aren't in those preferred unions, we get to go on the government dole. Now, at the debate, he did take a bit of a hit when he couldn't account for the price of all of his socialist policies, healthcare especially. It's not surprising, and it shouldn't be if you've listened to this show in the past. But why is it important to understand that none of this is surprising? Why is it important to understand the issue that surrounds price and the price tag of all of these socialist policies? It's because this is a prime example of how economically different Sanders really is from the average person who believes in republicanism. And what I mean by republicanism is those that believe in the republic that has been set up here in the United States. Not in pure democracy, not in direct democracy, but in the republic, our system of federalism that exists, okay? That is what I'm talking about when I talk about republicanism. But there is a very vast difference between what we believe on the Republican side and what Bernie Sanders believes on the socialist side. Because for Bernie Sanders, this question of price and how you're going to pay for it is foreign to him. He can't answer the question how he would make up the gap in payment versus cost because he doesn't care. Okay, folks, it's called MMT, which means spending really doesn't matter to him and his economic team. Modern monetary theory is something that I have talked about before here on this show. And in fact, you can go to the YouTube channel. Again, that's youtube.com/Andrew Coppens. You can see an entire situation, an entire video dedicated to just modern monetary theory for you. But the basics of MMT goes like this. It is the belief that countries that issue their own fiat currency do not have to worry about accumulating too much debt because it can always print more money to pay the interest on that debt. So let's take a real world example from Bloomberg.com, Mike Bloomberg's own business, hardly right wing. Quote, "So the only constraint on spending is inflation, which can break out if the public and private sector spend too much at the same time. As long as there are enough workers and equipment to meet growing demand without igniting inflation, the government can spend whatever it would like to maintain employment and then achieve goals such as halting climate change, or in this case, providing healthcare for everybody." Again, head over to that YouTube page if you want more in-depth information on modern monetary theory. What it really means is that it doesn't matter how much money Bernie Sanders wants to spend, they're just going to be able to print more into existence to alleviate any inflation that would come from this exorbitant, we're talking $60 to $90 trillion in spending. New spending, by the way. After all, the world runs on the American dollar, and it's going to forever, right? So what's the difference if you're Bernie Sanders? That is his economic thinking. So I want you to be abundantly clear here. We know, if you believe in free markets and capitalism, that you can't just keep spending money over and over and over and not pay it back or pay it down or pay it down or pay it down. Just like in our own personal lives, if we were to just say, screw it, we're going to spend forever, it wouldn't work. We would either face bankruptcy or jail or even worse. But let's get back to this Medicare for All idea for a moment, since really this is the key program everybody's paying attention to, and to this idea of it saving the average American money overall, because this is the second prong of Bernie Sanders' thought process here. Well, who cares what it's going to cost? We can just print money into existence to pay down that debt. That's part one. Part two is, but it's also going to save us money. Shockingly, Bernie is lying about this as well, cherry-picking just one study, and a flawed study at that, in very crucial ways. From Reason magazine, Bernie responded by citing a study that, quote, just came out of Yale University, published in Lancet magazine, one of the prestigious medical journals in the world. A study co-written by a former unpaid Sanders advisor purports to show that Sanders' Medicare for All plan would save $450 billion a year and 68,000 lives. That's a huge amount of lives saved and a huge amount of money saved, right? But a detailed article produced by Kaiser Health News and PolitiFact, however, rates Sanders' claim mostly false. The true part is that such a study exists. The false rating comes from the story's conclusion that the Lancet study's major findings are wildly disingenuous because they ignore or discount much of the evidence about what effects such a program would have on the healthcare system overall. The Lancet study assumes, for example, that the Sanders plan could pay Medicare rates across the board. Now, what you need to know is that Medicare rates are about 70%, and that is something that Chris Jacobs and I, who is a healthcare policy expert, have talked about. This idea that you just slash 30% of your payment rates to hospitals. We already know what that effect is because most doctors refuse to take Medicare because they can't afford to take Medicare. All right? But back to the Reason study. Medicare rates are far lower than private insurance rates, and the hospital lobby is a powerful political force that has successfully fought off payment reductions in multiple venues. When Washington state set up a government-run health insurance plan, state lawmakers ended up boosting rates to about 170% of what Medicare pays. So what does that mean? A 170% increase in the payment rate from what Bernie Sanders believes, or what this Lancet study believes would be the payment rate. So everything is out of whack already. But let's go ahead and just move on here to energy, because he's literally advocating for the government to take over that industry from Politico. A Sanders administration would pour funding into the four existing power marketing administrations that are overseen by the Energy Department, as well as the Tennessee Valley Authority, and one newly created entity to vastly expand their solar, wind, and geothermal power production. Those organizations currently provide power for hydroelectric dams to 33 states and would be able to sell the increased green energy to local utilities nationwide, creating a sort of public option that would compete with the coal, natural gas, and nuclear plants owned by privately owned power generators. Okay? You get the point here. The government's going to put the thumb on the scale and eventually just gobble it all up. Well, folks, for me, he is a communist in sheep's clothing. It's important to label him correctly. It is important to have us, not him, framing the debate. On that note, it is time for us to get to a break right here on Mojo 50 Radio. On the flip side, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that debate. We're going to talk about coronavirus and perhaps the Libertarian Party and open borders. All right, folks, I hope you've had a wonderful break there. I hope you got yourself a new beverage because we've got a lot to talk about on this half of the show. Do not forget, first off, follow me at The Coppens Show. That's Facebook, that's Twitter, that's Instagram, that's Parlay. Wherever you like to get your social media on, I'm probably there. So feel free to interact with the show. Hashtag critical thinking. Hashtag socialism sucks. Let's get that stuff trending here. But before we get into the bulk of coronavirus, let's talk open borders and the Libertarian Party. We have got to talk about our wonderful, wonderful friends at Sovereign Rising Custom Apparel. That's right. Sovereign Rising Custom Apparel is a sublimation printing small business with great quality, great communication. They've got everything from t-shirts, hats, tumblers, all points in between. You know, whether you're a small business like we are here at Mojo 50, or whether you have an upcoming event, hit up Emily and the team at Sovereign Rising Custom Printing. You can go to their Facebook page. It's just search Sovereign Rising Custom Apparel. Sovereign Rising Custom Apparel. Folks, it is custom work from a small business created out of necessity, and we all know that can be the mother of invention. So, again, Facebook.com, Sovereign Rising Custom Apparel. Find them on Facebook. You'll see all of their wonderful stuff. We really appreciate their support, and in the coming weeks, I'll have some potential for giveaways and all sorts of wonderful goodness just for you, courtesy of Sovereign Rising Printing. But before we left off, we were talking about the existential threat, right, of Bernie Sanders and socialism. But I want you to understand this part, right? Because some people are going to say, how dare you call him a communist? How dare you do all those labelings on Bernie Sanders and not communism? Well, folks, if the shoe fits, wear it, number one. And number two, let me show you your friends and I'll show you who you are. Because we all know through Project Veritas, through some of the things that the Blaze have been doing, right? Not a single person in that Project Veritas video, those videos that were shown of campaign people, not volunteers, actual campaign people in South Carolina, and I can't remember where the second person was. They were calling for gulags, re-education camps, killing people who don't believe in socialism. Not a single one of those people have been removed from their post either, by the way. Then you look at some of their senior campaign staff, people like Wendy Wong. I mean, just look her up. Look her up. She has been involved in some of the biggest anti-Semitic campaigns, some of the most active socialist and communist campaigns out there today. There are so many other names that come to mind, but you should check those names out for yourself. It is not my job to provide you every bit of information, but just do your own research if you don't believe me, because what that adds up to for me is that Bernie Sanders is not a democratic socialist. He is a communist, and a revolutionary communist at that. I mean, the guy calls Bibi Netanyahu a reactionary racist repeatedly over the course of the last week. A racist? It's unbelievable how anti-Semitic this Jewish man is. Yes, Bernie Sanders is ethnically Jewish, but he is not religiously Jewish. He claims he cares about Israel because he lived in a kibbutz a few times. What's a kibbutz? Of course, it's a communal way of living. Now, it wouldn't shock you to find out that Bernie Sanders spent most of his young adult life living in communist communes and then deciding to spend a couple of months over in Israel living in a commune as well. Because why? Bernie Sanders, at his core, is a leech. He is suckling off the teat of the American taxpayer for most of his adult life, and when he wasn't doing that, he was suckling off the teat of everybody else. This man believes in collectivization of society. That can only mean one thing: communism. But anyway, let's get into something that is potentially more dangerous than communism, and that's the coronavirus. All right? Now, I need to apologize here because a few weeks ago, some of you may have taken my segment on the coronavirus as if I wasn't taking this virus seriously enough. But I want to be clear here. My point was that when you look at the statistical numbers, and you can still say this today, okay, the common flu virus strains kill more people annually than the coronavirus has already killed. Does the media constantly freak out over the common flu? No. Instead, they let us know that it's flu season. Everybody crosses their fingers that we got the strain of the flu vaccine correct, and then we go on about our daily lives. Now, coronavirus is a little bit different because of how bad it is in terms of how many people contract the virus, right? They're talking about a 0.1 rate to basically 2 people for every 1 person that has it gets it. So there is a difference in its intensity, okay? Well, this week, outbreaks began in places like Iran, Italy, and South Korea in pretty major ways, and of course, the media is in full freak-out mode. The CDC and everybody else is saying, it's going to come to America, we need to be prepared, yada, 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 okay? All of this tanked the stock market amid the fears of global disruption to business. I'm not going to say that, this is not serious. I think it could be serious, but I'm going to make a bold prediction here. If this isn't the seasonal thing like the common flu is, okay? If this is not a seasonal thing, going dormant in the way that the regular flu does, I'm going to say that we're going to see a wave of isolationism within the United States, unlike anything that we've seen since the 1800s. Because what we're seeing is that we, as capitalists, we're reliant almost wholly on Asian countries for the production of major products. We really are not producing the vast majority of things that make life work. For instance, simple medication, 80 to 85% of which is produced in China. What is happening in China? Factories are still shut down. People are not going to work. Production has completely halted. There's only a limited supply of these things on hand. And once and if this is not a seasonal thing, if that happens, what do you think is going to happen here? Okay? What you see, or what you're going to see, is suddenly we have got to bring all this production back to the United States. Now, while that may temporarily be good, what it's going to do then is, one, we've already got scarcity, and that creates inflation of prices. Then, two, what it's going to mean is that prices are naturally going to have to continue to rise because as the American worker gets involved, price of labor, price of actual production of these products goes sky high. We're talking about people making dollars a day to people making $15, $20 an hour. You don't think your price to consume these goods would go up? Do I think America has the capacity to be able to ramp up production? Potentially. I mean, the companies will still exist. We can still put production in motion. But the absolute infrastructure that it would take to put this together on the mass scale that's going to be needed is naturally going to increase prices. Again, supply plus the disruption plus bringing that production home is naturally going to mean a rise in prices. And what does that mean for the stock market? What does that mean for businesses? It means less profit. It means less capital on hand. It means less growth in the stock market. That is bad news all the way around because everybody is tied into the stock market, whether that's through your 401k or your pension or your IRA or through investments or through your company existing in general. It could potentially be a really rough period later into 2020 if this is not a seasonal thing. If we can get through April and China can ramp up production and South Korea can ramp up production, right? Then fine. I think we'll be okay. But if not, we are going to see isolationism be the number one topic here. And I think that's to a benefit of Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders talks like an isolationist. He doesn't talk about global economy. He talks about the American economy. He talks about the American worker. He talks about all of the things that would make us necessarily isolationist. That is not good news for the American consumer. That is not good news for almost anybody except for Bernie Sanders. Okay? That makes a communist potentially the front runner for the President of the United States of America. Now, the good news here is that most experts in this field believe this acts quite a bit like the flu. Therefore, it looks like this could be a dormant situation. And if it is a dormant situation on hand, then, well, we may not be as isolationist. It may not have nearly the effect that everybody thinks it's going to, and the stock market will rebound. The American economy will recover, and we're likely to see Donald Trump be the president of the United States for 4 more years. It's just that simple. It's the economy, stupid, as some pundits like to tell us. It is. It's literally down to the economy. I can tell you that, personal wage growth has happened. The overall unemployment rate is very healthy. In fact, we're as close to full employment as humanly possible, which means wage growth, which means a lot of good things as long as inflation is controlled. So it's really, I think, up to the coronavirus as to who wins the presidency in the 2020 election. It's really frightening to think that it's something that is completely out of our personal control. I know that seems extreme. I know that seems unfathomable, but it's true. Take a look at how we got to FDR. Take a look at how we got Woodrow Wilson. Take a look at a lot of the presidencies that have happened throughout the 20th century and tell me that it's not economic. Tell me that people don't see what's in front of them and vote, whether or not it was Coolidge's fault or whether or not FDR actually got us in or out of the Great Depression. It's the perception of what is personally happening right in front of you now that matters. It's not that maybe Trump's tax policy, his ability to actually tackle regulation and deregulate some forms of the economy, some of the good things that he's done economically. You don't think that tariffs on China are really going to come into play if the coronavirus and suddenly the supply of goods and services from China starts drying up? You don't think that's going to come into play? So good Trump and bad Trump could be at play. But the American people, by and large, are going to say, well, wait a second. I'm seeing, family members starting to lose jobs. I'm seeing all of these negative effects. I'm going to vote the other way. That happens all too often. Even if we make it as stark of a choice as socialism/communism, I prefer to use the word communist when it comes to Bernie Sanders, as you well know throughout this episode. So even if we get this stark of a moral choice, people are going to look at their personal economic situation and make that choice. And along with isolationism comes the ability for socialists to tap right into it. Now, you could say that Donald Trump may be an isolationist himself, but I think outside of the immigration side of things, and that's where I think you have the isolationist nature of Donald Trump at hand. But when you take a look at his ability or want to take the fight overseas, you take a look at the fact that he put troops in Saudi Arabia, the fact that he took out Soleimani, all of the things that have gone on internationally, he's open to trade. He's open to talking, even if it's to authoritarians, even if it's to people like the people in North Korea. He is much more globally aware and globally willing to deal with things on an economic scale than Bernie Sanders would be. Bernie Sanders is wholly focused internally. I would argue that Donald Trump is focused externally on getting good trade deals, on reestablishing our dominance in that field. I don't think that's where Bernie Sanders lives, but that is going to play well if the economy is tanking. So that is why all of what I've talked about here is vitally important to understand, and most importantly, to get in front of, to call him out for his isolationism, to call him out as a reactionary person, to call out socialism as not only economically unfeasible, but morally bankrupt. That is what we have got to realize could potentially be the fight that's on hand in 6 months. And if we're not making the case now, it's too late by the time that we realize, oh crap, the coronavirus is no longer a seasonal thing. We have got to start making that case. Talk to your friends, talk to the people at work, talk to them about the morality or immorality of socialism. Talk to them about what would happen if we become isolationist due to this. That is the key here. You can tie all the numbers and facts and figures you want, but if you can make it into a personal, moral narrative, that wins the day, whether it's because of the coronavirus or in spite of the coronavirus. I think it's morally imperative that we have that discussion. But we talk about the externality and the open borders of socialism. There's also open borders within the Libertarian Party, and I happen to be more libertarian leaning than most. So on one side, when you look at the potential for the coronavirus to impact things, it could also impact what? Well, it could impact immigration. So on one side right now, you've got the Dems telling us that they're for full-on open borders, just let everybody in, screw it all, right? And then making sure that they give out government-paid-for health care to those illegal immigrants. Those people that just want to cross the border for freedom. On the other side, you've got the most restrictive president of my lifetime when it comes to immigration in Donald Trump. And this idea of building the wall and keeping out illegal immigrants and restricting legal immigration to a degree that we have never seen since, I don't know, maybe the 20s, maybe the 30s. But there is a third side of thought here that nobody seems to want to talk about. It's just left and right. There is a libertarian thought process here, which says, okay, well, we should recognize the free movement of labor and people across borders, but screw the social safety net that would be in place. So this is how the Libertarian Party actually puts it on its own website when it comes to immigration. Quote, libertarians believe that people should be able to travel freely as long as they are peaceful. A truly free market requires the free movement of people, not just products and ideas. Of course, if somebody has a record of violence, credible plans for violence, or acts of violently, then libertarians support blocking their entry, deporting and or prosecuting and imprisoning them, depending on the offense. So I want to be clear here. When we're talking about libertarians and open borders, it's not open borders the way that the far left Bernie Sanders, AOC crowd thinks of open borders, okay? What open borders means is simply the ability of people to be able to decide where they want to live, how they want to work, whom they want to work for, without the restrictions like only 1 million people get in or yada, yada, yada. The open borders of the left is just let everybody in. We don't need to check them. Don't have a border. What the policy of the Libertarian Party clearly states is let's check. Let's check if they're violent, or if you know that they might have plans to act violently, or if while they're here going through the immigration process, they commit an act of violence, then you deport them. Then you prosecute them, then you imprison them, and then afterwards you deport them. That's a very different situation because the left is telling us that they don't care about any of that. They want them here. They can stay here. They have a right to stay here. Okay? The libertarians draw a line. They say, yeah, let's have the free movement of people across these borders, but let's make sure that inside of that, we've got some rules and regulations. Most importantly, another part of the plank of the Libertarian Party goes like this, quote, libertarians do not support classifying undocumented immigrants as criminals. Our current immigration system is an embarrassment. People who would like to follow the legal procedures are unable because these procedures are so complex and expensive and lengthy. If Americans want immigrants to enter through legal channels, we need to make those channels fair, reasonable, and accessible. I think that is key here. What they're saying is, let's open the borders, but let's make legal immigration so much more easy. I think that's important. Now, I will not agree with the Libertarian Party on the undocumented immigrants as criminals. I think that you have to make the differentiation between what happens prior to this new idea in place and then post. I think anybody that is here illegally and entered this country illegally prior to the implementation of this policy has to be a criminal, has to be deported, has to go back to the country whence they came. Whether that's from Africa, whether that's from Central America, South America, Asia, it doesn't matter to me. Go home, go through the legal channels, and become a legal citizen. Become a legal immigrant. Now, can we stop all illegal immigration from happening? I don't think that is realistic. But I think if you have the policy of easy access, fair, reasonable, and easy access to legal immigration channels, 90% of people would take that path. Who wants to be a criminal, right? Who just says, oh yeah, you know what? I'm just going to cross that border illegally. Doesn't make sense to me. So that's where I have a little bit of a difference in the Libertarian Party. But what is largely missing is why many people won't support the platform of the party writ large is that we also have a massive built-in welfare state. We have a magnet for people to want to come here illegally. They know that the American people are going to take care of them, whether that's through government health care. Because right now, if you're an illegal immigrant, you can walk into any emergency room and get care. We have this entire social safety net in place, whether that's through Social Security, Medicare, all of those things, right? We've got all of that in place. It is an absolute magnet. So you cannot open the borders. You cannot make immigration more easy into this country or throughout the world if you also have welfare states in place. Because everybody's just going to flood into the welfare, the country with the greatest welfare state and mooch off of that. That's exactly what's going to happen. Take a look at what's already happening with refugees. 9 times out of 10, refugees out of the Middle East come into Europe and land in where? Places like Germany and France and in Italy, where they have guaranteed benefits for anybody that lives in those societies. It's a magnet to attract those individuals. Same thing with the Scandinavian countries who have those large social safety nets, those large welfare states. How do you think there's a massive Muslim population terrorizing parts of Sweden? How do you think Denmark and Norway and all these other countries magically have large Muslim populations when they were largely white, homogenic Christian societies before? But early frontrunner to the Libertarian Party candidacy, Jacob Hornenberger, is advocating for opening the immigration system while also getting rid of that magnet. Hornenberger said the following all the way back in last July during a Libertarian Party meeting on this matter. Quote, "We live in a society that is based on massive mandatory charity, with the crown jewels of the system being Social Security and Medicare, along with hosts of others. There is no way to reconcile a genuinely free society and mandatory charity. No way at all, because people have a natural God-given right to keep everything that they earn and decide for themselves what to do with it. And So if we're going to achieve a free society, it necessarily presupposes a dismantling of the infringements on liberty, and that includes Social Security and Medicare. You have to repeal, abolish, dismantle infringements on liberty in order to achieve the free society. So I'm sure many of the listeners to Mojo 50 Radio, this is an idea and a philosophy that you're probably aware of existing in the Libertarian Party, but I'm not sure that a lot of people have given it much thought. I think there's a lot of people that are build the wall. There are a lot of people for restrictive immigration policies. Now, I would agree that we need restrictive immigration policies if we have that social safety net in place, right? If we've got the welfare state. But if we don't, sorry. For me, I think we are better off as a society if we put the guideposts in place of legal immigration in an easy path towards that immigration, while also being able to make it abundantly clear, here are the rules. You violate the rules, you do not get to continue your path to citizenship. And let them go, but also make it very clear that while here, you are expected 100% of the time to be able to fend for yourself. Now, if people want to do charitable works on their own free will towards helping those immigrants and providing some of those safety nets, that's up to them. That's up to organizations of free association to do so. I've got no problem with that. In fact, my faith would tell me that we have to help the least amongst us, and that doing so of your own free will, your own charity, is a good way to get into heaven. Luckily, I think that we could all agree that our current immigration policy does not work for anybody, whether that is a citizen, illegal immigrants, or illegal immigrants. I think what's happening on the southern border is awful. I think at least it's worth taking a longer look at the ideas of the Libertarian Party. And to that extent, I hope in the next couple of weeks to have Jacob Hornenberger and to have other people that are running for the Libertarian candidacy for president on this show, because I think it's important to really have a discussion about these ideas and to hone in on what people really believe within true libertarianism. Not just, I'm a free thinker, therefore I'm a libertarian type of people. All right, folks, on that note, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Critical Thinking right here on Mojo 50 Radio. Thank you to each and every one of you. Do not forget, follow me on social media at The Coppens Show. That's COPPENS, COPPENS for each and every single one of you that are new to this show. Don't forget, head over to the YouTube page. You can see the show in its entirety. If you're not listening live or watching live, that's youtube.com/Andrew Coppens. And coming up next is my millennial brother from another mother. Yes, it's Matthew Holloway in the Hollow Net. And stay tuned, because March is going to have something special between the two of us. As always, keep being smart, keep being safe, and Matthew 5.